which is that there we go. Which is simply that, yeah, it is, as many of you know, kind of hard to read a virtual room. So please, we'd love for this session to be as interactive as possible. We're a fairly small group. And so the beauty of that is like, we can be talking in real time and answering your questions. So I absolutely also know what it is like to be joining calls when my kid is homesick, when I'm at the office, when I'm juggling multiple things. But this is a safe space, so no worries if you've got a lot going on in your background. But if you can join us on video, please do. And also just feel free to take yourself off mute if we're talking about something and you've got a question. Alternatively, feel free to throw that in the chat, and Jeff and myself will kind of get to those or interject and bring that into the discussion. So, all right. With that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Great. All right. So, as Esther said, we are here to talk about sales strategy and pitching, which I think everybody in this Zoom room is really familiar with, right? This is kind of at the heart of your business and how to make it grow. But first, I want to start off just by giving you a brief overview about Curate, so you also have a better idea about who we are and what we do. So Curate is a women-owned food tech company dedicated to empowering local communities by creating a sustainable and inclusive supply chain. I say this pitch often, and so I also know that regularly people are like, well, what does that mean, right? So for those of you who haven't engaged with us before, the way that we achieve our mission of creating an empowered supply chain is really through one of three core programs. So the first program is Curate Courses, and that is our technical assistance program. It's a 10-week program that is run regionally, meaning we run it through specific Maryland counties at once, right? Or in a specific Virginia county. And the intent of that program is to help businesses grow and scale their business, right? So we have these small cohorts, typically of 10 to 12 businesses. And each session we're running through different operational facets of growing and scaling a business, including customer persona, like the presentation that we did for the first workshop. So that's on the supply side, is creating a more equitable, resilient, sustainable supply chain. What we need to do first is really invest in our regional suppliers to do that. And then on the demand side, we also partner with anchor institutions in the area, and we help them procure food, farm, and beverage products. So what that means is week over week, we're meeting with food service management teams, we're meeting with executive leadership, we're meeting with community wellness groups, and helping to identify and physically source products that then can get integrated into their operations, whether it's a hospital cafeteria, corporate gifting, employee engagement and retention campaigns. So folks who on this call who know Curate probably know that oftentimes when we're working with vendors, we similarly are kind of asking some similar questions about where you're at in your growth, so that we can better understand what opportunities might exist within our buyer network, right? So we consider ourselves a bit of a bridge builder between big and small, and similar to Moco Made program, really just a matchmaker of resources also, because we know that there's a lot of folks in this area who are trying to expand and enhance our local supply chain, and to do so requires a lot of resources. So if we don't have it in-house, oftentimes we know someone who does, so we would love to make connections too. All right, so with that, I just want to give a brief overview of customer persona. And the reason why I have this picture up here is because we all walk through farmers markets, through grocery, through different retail operations on a regular basis, right? And I think at the heart of customer persona really is identifying and making sure that you are really clear on who your target customer is, the problem that you're solving for them, and how it is that you're marketing, messaging, and showing up to identify and further expand, that group of buyers for your business. So I think a lot of us have had this experience where we walk through a retail operation and, you're walking right by a product that might be like your next favorite chip or cookie or beverage, right? And this really is why we delve into customer persona, is making sure that you are able to effectively set up your business, including your team members, to identify, learn about, and target those specific people. Because at the end of the day, you might have an amazing product or service, but if you aren't correctly identifying and engaging with that target customer, how successful can you be? Or really, what is that kind of, what is a reasonable scale of growth then that you can expect if you're not connecting those two dots? So this was a slide that I pulled from our last presentation. And again, really just focusing on kind of the high level concepts of why we talk about customer persona and why we walk through exercises to identify and even sometimes name, right? Customer persona in essence is like a fictional character that you're associating with that core group of buyers. So I love to ask the question, why are we doing this? And the reason is, like I said in the last slide, your business needs customers in order to succeed and to ensure that you can continue to grow and iterate on your product and service. The who and the why of your customers' behavior is incredibly valuable. So, for example, like let's say your target customer is a mom between 35 and 45, and she loves going to the farmer's market that is closest to her house, right? And she loves your greens and she loves integrating those into weekly salads, but doesn't have time to make it to, let's say, the farmer's market the next county over, or into another retail environment where you're currently wholesaling your products. If that core customer is someone who is purchasing from you on repeat, who potentially is providing word of mouth marketing for your business, how does that understanding of your core customer then inform your operations, where you're showing up, how you're messaging your product, and other types of customers that you're trying to engage, right? There's a lot to extrapolate based off of those core customers and those target customers that you're engaging with week over week. And one thing I want to say too, because I say this oftentimes when we're consulting with or meeting with small suppliers, is that you all have this incredible positioning, which is that you get to engage with your customers on a regular basis, right? Whether that's at pop-ups, whether that's at farmers markets, whether that's at different kind of food events that are happening like the Moco Eat Showcase. To have that kind of connection with your customers directly is invaluable, right? And I will say this, having worked for larger businesses in the past, that those large businesses pay lots and lots of money to identify exactly who their customers are, right? If you are only engaging with that customer through an online platform and e-commerce, that is a very different process. And that is a very different way of getting to know who it is that is seeking out your product and why, versus being able to have a conversation with them in person. So I love to just elevate the fact that you all are engaging with those core customers on a regular basis and use that as an opportunity. And the reason why I say that is because of point number 3, which is that you don't have to make assumptions about your customers when you are engaging with them on a regular basis, right? You can come up with different hypotheses. And actually, that's one of my very favorite things to do, is to really like create these hypotheses, exactly that. If my customer is X, and then I show up at these events, I am likely to increase my sales because this is where that customer goes, right? If you're considering, if you get an invitation to table somewhere, participate in an event, and let's say it's going to cost a certain amount of money, next time you're at your farmer's market or tabling or some other event where you are engaging directly with your customers, or heck, you're even doing a delivery to one of your core customers or that big catering order, engage in a conversation with them and say, hey, do you all go to this event? Are you interested in participating in this, right? That is the direct way that you get to debunk an assumption or challenge that hypothesis, because that information is invaluable. And again, can be used to really inform both your internal and your external strategies for growing your business. Point number 4, learn to increase brand awareness, engagement, and customer loyalty. So very similarly, right? you get to ask your customers, like, what problem am I solving for you? And like, how else might I acknowledge or appreciate how consistently you're supporting me? So again, you can test this out in real time, which is so amazing at the farmer's market, right? Like maybe you're doing a punch card. Maybe you've got like a little branded sticker or another small piece of swag, right? I know how expensive that stuff gets. But you see that customer who religiously comes up to your table on Saturdays, and you know how wonderful and supportive they are of your business. So throw a little extra in there. Or even better, if you're experimenting with a new crop or a new product or a new flavor, and you've got like a mini sample of that, throw that in your bag and say, hey, I'm experimenting with a new product. I'd love your feedback on it. That kind of engagement pays for itself in dividends. It's amazing because they feel very seen and appreciated for supporting your business, and you're getting valuable feedback on new products or services that you're considering adding to your business. And the last point, make more confident business decisions, is exactly what I just outlined, right? You get to lean into that customer base that you have an active relationship with, because business is based on relationships as much as sometimes we feel like it's not. But you get to lean into that customer persona or target customer to really help inform and test ideas and theories that you have about your offerings and services. So I sound like a broken record, y'all, but you have the absolute luxury of getting to engage with your customers. And even on those days where that does not feel like a luxury, I assure you there are questions that you could be asking or ways that you could be engaging that can help inform your business and the decisions that you're making around growing and scaling. Business is about solving problems. And when we talk about our customer persona, right, we're asking ourselves the questions of what problem am I solving for my customer, right? Am I providing easy, reheatable meals for a busy professional on the go? And I would say when it comes to pitching buyers, you want to be asking yourself the very same question. What problem am I solving for buyers? Now we have to kind of switch our mindset a little bit, right? Because you still have your end customer, which is the person coming into that grocery store, the person coming to that farmer's market who's actually consuming your product. But you have to put your buyer hat on and really think about, okay, how does my product amplify this particular retail environment? And so one of the ways in which we identify how we're solving problems and conveying our value to buyers is through a sales sheet. So I'm kind of curious, like, and folks feel free to come off mute or to come off camera real quick, like who here already has a sales sheet? And also just curious if folks can chime in, like, how many different versions of your sales sheet have you, for those of you who have one, have you made across the time of your business? I'm going to pause right here and encourage you all to come off mute and just share any anecdotes that you can about your sales sheets. There's no right or wrong answers here.
Okay, I'll come off. I'll say that I have a sales sheet that Curate made for me. So.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah,
think
we
of my
spend a
sales
lot
sheet.
of time talking about sales sheets and helping vendors with sales sheets.
But yeah, it's been a great tool. I don't know that I've done a lot of different versions of it. I did sort of take it and make it into more of a sales rack card.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
I guess mostly for customers who are coming to farmers markets. It's just kind of a step up from just giving them a business card when you have like a little rack card that you can give.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in and share anything about sales sheet? And it's also a-okay if you don't have a sales sheet yet and you have no idea where to start.
Julia, my last business, I made a couple of different sales sheets, and I would say some of the differentiators I put on them were some sales sheets had prices on them and other sales sheets did not have prices on them, depending on what use case I was going to use them for. And another thing that I thought was quite useful was a sales sheet is oftentimes going to be maybe your first interaction with somebody if you've just been emailing back and forth with someone. And so I made it like a proper sales sheet on page 1, and page 2 was just quotes from happy customers, so they could kind of understand that they were in good company. So
Thank you, Jeff. I feel like we could have a whole workshop around the schools of thought on sales sheet with pricing versus not. And I think that one is like a little bit subjective, but happy to like hold some space or chat about that further in the comments. So in terms of sales sheets, right, we highly recommend them. To Jeff's point, oftentimes it is the first way in which you are engaging with a buyer, because getting them in person can be very, very challenging. And so we at Curate highly recommend that you really think through your sales sheet in a way that is conveying both in words and then also through design who it is that target customer is, right? Because not only are you essentially trying to identify your value proposition to your buyer, but you want them to have a pretty quick sense of who it is that you are marketing to, right? That target persona. And so that's why we go through the exercises that we do, and why we always encourage you to be reevaluating who it is that target customer is. Because the more easily you can help that buyer essentially merchandise and position your product in the right place to attract that customer, the higher your velocity is going to be. And that is just a win-win for you, for your buyer, and for your customers. So I want to go through a little exercise. I've got a sample sales sheet. And I think this is almost like a reverse of the exercise that we did in the customer persona workshop. But I again will implore you all to pop off mute or come off, turn your cameras on. And I would just love to hear from the folks on this call, who you think this sales sheet is targeting in terms of the end customer, and what else stands out to you, right? Because these sales sheets say a lot while saying very little at the same time. So I'm going to put this sample sales sheet up. Some of you may recognize it if you've seen it before, for seductive foods. So let me know if you want me to zoom in on this a little bit, if that's helpful. I know some of the copy is pretty small around the labels over here. So what are some of the core elements on here? That, put your buyer hats on, y'all. Like, pretend as though you are working at Mom's and you are purchasing for local products there. We're gonna just span categories. And what stands out to you on this buyer sheet? Lorian, I see you studying it, so I am going to call on you too.
Sure. I'm just sort of studying, what stands out to me is that, it's clear that there are, you're looking at, on the backside, you're looking for labels down the edge of the product box, which, as a retailer, that's exactly what you want to see, right? Which is like, that everything's ready to go and packaged appropriately for retail sale. So
exactly.
That's up to me.
Yeah, and I'll share a little anecdote from the Curate world, which, right, we work most closely with institutional food service. So that is a little different than, your kind of retail grocery environment. But very similarly, we have a number of buyer partners who kind of a growing trend, both in grocery and in institutions, is kind of the self-service model. And so there's kind of the Amazon Go style little cafes or kiosks that essentially allow staff and visitors at hospitals and universities to buy products without a register being manned by a human. And so I will say there is a growing importance and urgency around the brands that we partner with having UPC codes, because if there's no UPC code on those products, that means that in order to integrate that product into the system, they have to manually generate those and label them, which quite transparently basically means that a sale may not happen in that realm, because that's just additional work for that buyer to do to ensure that product is able to integrate into that operation smoothly. But yeah, Lorian, that is it's a spot on call. That is a retail ready product. Anything anything else stand out that you find interesting, that you think is strange, right? Like, open the floor.
I'll jump in. I have to say, I think this is about as good as a sales sheet's going to get. I think it's pretty awesome. One of the things, or the first things that caught my eye were, most importantly, it's very obvious what the product is, which might sound silly, but I've seen a lot of people put together sales sheets and you're kind of questioning still what the product is at the end of the day, like maybe what size it is. Like you might understand it's cake, but is it slices of cake? Is it a whole cake? What is it? And this is very obvious what this is. They literally, I think one of the most important things on this whole sale sheet actually is the very top photo, which shows you the size of the product in comparison to other things, and also shows you like an application for the product, which like this is a great one. You might be wondering, what am I supposed to do with a cheese that's made out of seeds? And they're showing you this is amazing for a charcuterie board replacement, right? But I think you could utilize that for anything. Like you might think you said maybe you make drinks, right? Maybe you make a any special drink, a relaxation drink or something, and you would think it's very obvious what you might use that for. But I think a picture here showing that this is a drink that you're supposed to use when you're studying, right? You see somebody who has it while they're studying, it helps the buyer make a connection as to where they might sell that product and how they might utilize it in their retail space.
Jeff, I totally agree. And Jeff and I see a lot of sales sheets in our realm, because we work with a lot of vendors across the DMV. And I think sometimes we can get lost in the importance of like actual messaging, right? Copy. But to Jeff's point, I too oftentimes don't see effective imaging. And we work in food, y'all, right? Like that is a very visceral experience. And if you're not able to get in and actually sample a buyer, the next best thing is to convey how it is your product should be enjoyed, right? And this is a plant-based cheese, so there is no dairy products in it. But to Jeff's point, they are showing it, you know, like you would see a standard cheese platter, as opposed to, right, sometimes we see sliced cheese to be used on burgers and such. And so I think that picture is also fantastic, and very much is just, and I think in tandem with that, you can see down here, forgive my cursor, but you can see that they also include really, really critical information about the unit dimensions. So, you know, all of the, and I'm talking specifically about retail and grocery here, but they have planograms that essentially where they chart out all of their retail products. You know, there is very limited / also very valuable real estate across each of those shelves. And the purpose of a category buyer and the team overall is to really optimize that SKU mix across shelves in the dairy section. And so for them to understand exactly what size your product is, and then also the case dimensions, cold storage is also very critical and valuable real estate in any food service operation. And so knowing exactly how much room the cases are going to take up in that cold storage for inventory versus the unit dimensions, that allows them to figure out where exactly they can place your product, how much room it's going to take up, and how much backstock they can carry in their cold storage. So I also see those kinds of details and metrics omitted from a lot of sales sheets that I receive. I'll also flag right here, this is, as I'm sure lots of folks on this call are familiar with, kind of there's definitely a growing trend as well to really flag which allergens your product is free from, because that has just been a growing consciousness, a growing concern, and growing request from customers. And I think one way for us to make that really clear to our buyers is to both flag that, of course, in the ingredients, but then doing similarly kind of flagging that here in this kind of high level list of the product benefits. One other thing that I'll flag, which probably feels really, really obvious to everyone here, but again, I will say I see this omitted more than not, and I just get really confused, is there is an email and a phone number here. And if I had $1 for every sales sheet that I've received that was missing the appropriate contact information, I might be able to retire a little earlier. So just a reminder that if you are effectively essentially pitching a buyer, right? And this is part of that pitch, whether you're dropping off a sales sheet and some product or you're emailing this sales sheet to a buyer, they need to know how to order your product, or they need to know how to get in touch with you in case they have other questions, if they want to set up a tasting with you, or they want to set up a conversation. I would go so far as to say that I also love sales sheets that include specific guidance points on how to order your product, right? Are you selling through Fair? Is that where your buyers want you to buy your product? So I think where it makes sense, if you are wholesaling already, please be sure, and this is true for B2C as well, but make sure that your customers know exactly where to find your products and how to order those. So yeah, I mean, those are some great standouts on this sales sheet. I'll just kind of pause for 10 seconds and see if anyone else wants to flag anything that they don't like about this sales sheet.
I'll go. Sorry, my camera's off. My internet was a little spotty, so I don't want it to shut off. No, I was just thinking, it's really pretty. It's a little busy though. I think at first glance, it's like my eyeballs like are trying to find something to focus on. And so I'm just thinking about like I'm putting my retailer hat on, like what is going to be simple, clear, still beautiful, and like, eye-catching, like not, forgettable, in a stack of sell sheets. So I think there's a balance of having all of the information there, but not making it too busy and almost like, okay, this is too much, I don't know. Maybe it's a good thing that it has everything on the page. I don't know, but just that's my first impression was it's a little busy.
Esther, I think you're also spot on. And I will say, I think design is a very, very important part of your sales sheet. Now, I will also raise my hand and say that, like, I am not a graphic designer. And so this is where, generally speaking, right, there is some subjectivity here, but I agree with you. It is a bit busy. And I, too, when I kind of first look at this, now keep in mind, I'm showing you kind of, this is a front and a back. And so I'm showing you side to side, which probably isn't helping. But I agree that, like, there is a balance, there is a fine line between having the right amount of content on your sales sheet versus having too much and essentially dissuading your prospective buyer from going through and reading everything. I feel the same way about emails, quite frankly. Sometimes I'm like, oh, this email is like a little too lengthy. I don't think this person's actually going to read all of this. So this is where I would encourage you all, if you are kind of considering this, either if you're standing up your first sales sheet or you want to make improvements to your existing one, I would say for those of you who have access to or know of a creative director or graphic designer, feel free to like lean into those resources. For those of you who don't, and that is a-okay as well, there are some great templates on places like Canva. Curate uses Canva a lot for the marketing assets that we create, both internally, for our business, and then external facing documents as well. And so if you go, and that is a free resource, there are, it's kind of a freemium platform, so you can upgrade and get access to kind of more templates and graphics. But all that to say, I would highly encourage you, if you're starting from square one, or you just want some visuals to reference when thinking about how you might find and strike that balance in your own sales sheet, check out the templates. And then there's also great resources for this on Startup CPG. If you're in the CPG realm, that's a Slack community / group of kind of CPG professionals in the food space that similarly are kind of regularly discussing sales sheet layouts and design. And then, as always, kind of Google. I think we are consistently looking for examples and then pulling from, vendors that we partner with to kind of flag best practices. Because I do think that in the absence of, being able to meet with a buyer one-on-one, you want to make sure that that sales sheet is really conveying exactly what you want to be landing with that buyer and the messaging and the reason why they should be sourcing your product. So I'm going to segue from there because I think we could talk for multiple hours about sales sheets. But I do know also that the team here has some great resources for you as well on sales sheets. So I'll let Esther and Lorian kind of follow up with those templates. But I do just want to flag, and I did on that previous example, that it is important for buyers to know a lot more sometimes than just what's on your sales sheet or just about the product. And so I already flagged the dimensions and the weight. The case pack is also very critical, right? Because we're talking about very slim profit margins, particularly in the grocery space. And so if they are calculating the unit cost of your product, that needs to be essentially effectively calculated by understanding your case pack, as well as your delivery and or shipping fees. So for those of you who have shelf stable products and you're shipping, I would say please also consider either integrating that in some way to your sales sheet, or when doing that outreach to buyers, making that really, really clear that, great, you can ship 3 cases of that product and that's going to cost X. We work with a lot of vendors who ship product, and it is tricky, and we work with them to essentially create kind of these formulas for this is how much one case is going to cost, and generally speaking, we can replicate that by the number of cases that we're requesting on behalf of our buyers, so that we can factor that into our POs in advance, so that there's no hidden costs for buyers. Because I will tell you, a very quick and easy way to end or hurt a relationship with a buyer is by having hidden or surprise costs prop up on them, because that means that then they can't effectively price your product and or manage their P&L statements in terms of sales versus the cost of the product that they're bringing in. The shelf life of the product, for those of you with perishable goods, grocery and retail right now is very, very focused, and there's a lot of AI happening in this space around minimizing shrink, which is the amount of product that gets thrown out because they weren't able to sell it by the sell-by date. So make sure that that is really, really clear. And I would say for those of you, if you have a wholesale buyer in your area, those are the types of things where you can go above and beyond. And if you know that your cheeses are kind of coming up on that sell by date, pop by that store and say, hey, just checking in, the sell by date is coming up. How might we make sure that you don't have any leftover product at the end of this week, right? Maybe that's the week where you're doing a tasting in that store, because that buyer is going to appreciate you looking out for their shrinkage and making sure that you also care about seeing that product sold and creating that win-win situation for the buyer and for your business. And then the last thing I'll flag really is discounts, right? I think when many of us talk about wholesale, that already is a discounted price. And how might we intentionally leverage discounts to further buyer retention, to continue strengthening that buyer relationship? Now, I'm not saying you need to throw discounts left and right, as a way to kind of attract and or retain buyers, right? If a buyer is constantly asking you to discount your price even further, that might not be the right buyer for you. But what I will say is that discounts can be a very effective way to re-engage a buyer who perhaps has paused on buying your product because they didn't feel as though it was moving well, or that they were finding the right audience for your product. Or do you want to incentivize larger orders, right? Let's say your average wholesale order is 3 to 4 cases. But you really, from a DSD perspective, right? If you're self-delivering to those stores, then you really want to make sure that you're maximizing your delivery staff. And it would be great, right? You've done some back of the napkin math. And it'd be really great if you're able to essentially drop off 10 cases, per buyer. What might you do? How might you creatively find a way to get that buyer to 10 cases from 4 or 6, right? And so incentivizing those larger volume orders might be a great way to do that. Any other questions about sales sheets? What I will say is that we talk about this all the time, all day long, and this is a very kind of consolidated version of the importance of sales sheets, but I also want to make sure that if anyone has other questions or thoughts about that, that you've got an opportunity to say that here. Otherwise, I will segue and hand it off to my wonderful colleague, Jeff.
I did have a quick question.
Yeah.
So I had a wholesale opportunity with a two location restaurant in DC. And so they bought some cakes. It was like a barbecue place, a restaurant. Um, and they wanted to add like different desserts to their menu. But they didn't know how to, I guess, manage their own operations with how to like display the cakes, how to like instruct their kitchen staff to plate it and all that stuff. So I was kind of like coaching the owner on the phone of like how to do that. But then he was like, oh, can you draft like an SOP or some type of document? And I'm like, I didn't know like where that barrier was between like, this is your business, you run that how you want, but then I can give you kind of like recommendations for how to do that. And so I was kind of thinking like, does this belong on the sell sheet? Is this something different with like how to display it? I know you guys had the picture with like a use case for it, but where does it end with me telling them like how to like manage the operations for the cakes?
Yeah, that is such a good question. Thank you so much for sharing that. And like, congrats. Like, that's really exciting. When someone else wants to bring in and showcase your product in their operation, like, that's a great sign. So, to get kind of to the heart of what you're asking, right? Like, this is my feeling. And Jeff, feel free to chime in if you feel differently. But like, if a buyer is asking me to like consult on how best to showcase my product, right? You know your product better than anyone, right? Like how to make it look good, how best to like, present it, how best to plate it. And so I think in this particular instance, which is a unique one, right? Because essentially they are outsourcing some of their desserts and you are providing those. I think in this instance, like it is up to you and it's really up to you to decide how much energy and resources you want to put into to exactly the word you said, kind of coaching them. Now, what I will say is like, if this is a new relationship, right? And you are really interested, right? The orders are good. You're really interested. This feels good for you and your business is to be building this wholesale relationship. Then I would say like, I want to make sure that they are doing my product, like showcasing my product the right way. And I would essentially like do that coaching. I would, mock up, Jeff actually is a great person to call for this. Like he does these awesome merchandising mock-ups for some of our C-stores that we work with at universities, basically like showing them exactly like where to put each product and how to display the signage for that. That is like an SOP of sorts, right? That is that visual. And so I would say, while I think that will be fairly unique to this restaurant, unless it is your, kind of MO to continue doing some wholesale with restaurants to be a provider of their desserts, I would say like that is a really great situation for you to come in, build a lot of trust and really set up those restaurants for success in selling your product, right? I know a lot of vendors who are like a little weary of having other people essentially sell their product because they're concerned they won't do it justice in that plating or the way that they talk about it. And this restaurant is telling you, hey, come and coach us on this. Like, we'd love your advice because they want to do right by your product. And so my opinion is, if that makes sense for you and your business at this time, and that is a line of your business you want to grow, I would take advantage because more often than not, your wholesale buyer is not asking for that input. And then there's a little bit of that, oh, how are they showcasing my product kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yes, that definitely makes more sense. It sounds like control over my product, which is a good thing to have. So, okay.
And just building that relationship, and yes, boundaries are always a struggle in hospitality, but like I think this is like a good one in that they're inviting you to come into their operation and really just coach them on how to use your product best. And that I think is really just essentially coaching them on how to sell your product better, which is a win-win for everyone.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to circle back when I have more bandwidth to do that.
Yeah. And I think that's also okay, is to say, hey, I'd love to do that and I'm working through X, Y, and Z. Could we look at X date or X month, right? Because that too is just sending the message, I'm interested in supporting you in this way. I just can't do it right this moment. And the last plug I'll make, and then I'll hand it over to Jeff, who I should have handed over to a while ago, is just simply that, like, once you do get that set up the way you want it looking, take photos, promote it on your Instagram, have them share it, right? Put that marketing cap on. This is giving you another like great opportunity to engage with your buyer and better understand and better market what you're doing. Okay.
Thank
With
you.
that, yeah, of course. I'm gonna hand it off to Jeff.
All right. Can you all see my screen? Sweet. Thank you, Julia. That was very, very useful. I loved it. If I could just follow up on that last topic we were talking about, the only thing I want to say is that I would say, in general, most of us don't ask enough questions, just sort of make a lot of assumptions. And I would, as a producer, I would make the assumption always that the seller wants your help in figuring things out. So I would make the assumption always that they want your help and offer to help, offer to show them how this has been working at other places. The retailer just wants to obviously sell as much product as they possibly can, in the most effective way that they can. So yeah, I would just assume that that they want your help and ask questions. All right, so who am I? My name is Jeff Dion. I am originally from New England, but have lived here in Charlottesville, or just south of Charlottesville in Scottsville, for 11 years now. I've spent, I guess, yeah, I should actually probably say 11 years. I've spent about 11 years in food and beverage, or 12 years in food and beverage, starting at just working in restaurants on the floor, I ended up managing wine programs and being like a wine educator for restaurant groups in the area here. I then transitioned that to running the sales and catering department for Roots Natural Kitchen, which is a small chain that grew out of Charlottesville here. I have about 15 locations now across some of the more forgotten cities in our area, like Pittsburgh and Richmond and such. And then throughout that time period, I found that I was very, very interested in the importance of keeping the dollar local. And so I ended up, and actually my background being in food, I took a lot of paths to work with organizations who were trying to keep the food dollar as local as possible. It is our largest spend outside of our home, which is clearly very local. It's a tough one to not make local, but as much as we can from a food spend. And so I helped a great nonprofit up in New York City called the Food Education Fund develop a business accelerator program for underserved food community. And then transition that into working for a company called WeFunder, where we helped small businesses raise capital from their communities. And then from there, ended up being a consultant in that space to help the founders actually create beautiful pitches that they could then make sure that they could raise as much money as possible. I'd say throughout this period of time, before that, I was running a house painting business throughout college and post-college. My whole life has really been revolved around sales, because that's actually what you do on the floor in a restaurant too, in many capacities. There are many ways to sell things, and everybody's going to approach sales in their own way because we all have our own personality, and that's a real key in how we interact with folks and think about solving problems, and sales is really solving problems. But there are some steps that have been successful for every very successful salesperson, and so my hope is that I can help you understand those in the context of food over the next few slides here. This is my family off to the left here, by the way. My wife, a couple of kids. We're at a cool Cuban restaurant in Charlottesville called Guajiros. So I will ask a couple of questions. We have 30 minutes to run through this, so I won't dwell too long. But if anybody wants to this is an easy one. This is like a softball. So can anybody tell me some scenarios where you might be pitching your business? It's like the easiest one. Come on, anybody.
Like
Where
an
might you be
expo
pitching?
situation,
An
like,
expo.
trade
That's a good one.
showcase.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. I like that. Where
I'll
else
give
might
a
you be pitching your business?
I will give a fringe scenario and say that I've pitched Curate 3 times in an elevator because I've just like gotten into conversation with someone on an elevator and I was like, oh, okay, now I have to pitch Curate. And so
Wow, the stereotypical
it
elevator
pops
pitch.
up
That's awesome.
unexpectedly.
Yeah, I love that. That's great though. All right. Well,
I can also say that there's, for example, like at a farmer's market, a lot of our sellers sell the farmer's market, and retailers do come by there too, and
totally. Yeah,
products, and sometimes you're
absolutely.
just spot on the spot.
Well, I mean, there's 3 different scenarios right there. There are a million scenarios where you're going to pitch your business from like a locational standpoint, which does like the elevator thing. It's like depends on who you're talking to, obviously in that elevator, but it makes a big difference because that's a constraint on how many words you can say in that elevator before you guys depart. But generally, we're talking about maybe like a couple of buckets. And so we're talking about POS, which is like point of sale. We're talking about restaurants, farmers markets, that Lorian said, at a banquet or an expo, where you're literally like selling the product at that spot, or selling it for them to go get that pretty easily right after. You might also be pitching your business in another way, which is to get money from a bank or an angel investor, or like I was saying, WeFunder. Maybe you're asking your community to invest in you, or a grant, right? A social gathering, you might be doing that. That might be part of the elevator or deal, but you might be at a party and pitching your business, or you might be at your kid's soccer game and pitching your business. That's a very different situation. Even if they're like a one-to-one B2B customer, that's a different scenario than what you would pitch at somebody at your restaurant. And then you're always pitching indirectly too. You're pitching on your website, you're pitching on your sales sheets, through social media, through all your branding. So there are loads of ways to pitch your business. And who we are pitching to in each scenario changes. So yes, it changes with every scenario. You can think about when we're pitching at point of sale, we're obviously pitching to our potential customer or our current customers. We're pitching to investors, or pitching to potential customers and community supporters through social gatherings. And sometimes we're pitching to people we didn't even know we were pitching to through indirect channels, or we're pitching to the government. So all of these people think about their problems in a different way, and they think about your solution in a different way. And they all have a certain time constraint to them. And so the point here is that you need to know your audience before you start selling your product. You don't have one pitch. The pitch needs to be tailored to whoever you are talking to. So that's, excuse me, point number 1 here is thinking about who your audience is before you even begin. All right, this is like super fun. This is super low ball. What is your favorite movie? Somebody tell me their favorite movie.
The Princess Bride.
The Princess Bride. Nice. All right. This is a good, this would be a really good icebreaker in the beginning too. What's your favorite movie and why? Jeez. All right, The Princess Bride. What is the story that you, Lorian, are following throughout that?
It's sort of the overthrow of an evil king and the attainment of true love.
Okay. What's the story that you're following? What are you attracted to in the story?
The overthrow of the king.
Cool. I love it. So point number 2 in being able to successfully sell anything is that there's a story behind what you are going to tell, and you can phrase that story in many different ways. I'm going to give you a quick example of a TV show series on Netflix called The Gentleman. And I'll tell you, there's 2 stories that you can follow, and this is applicable in pretty much every single movie and every single book, or at least every single quality book and movie and story. So in the show, The Gentleman, this is a show that's based out of London or England, and it's about this young lad who comes back to his family's estate when his father, who is the Duke of this estate, passes away. And this gentleman, Eddie Halstead, takes over the estate. He's soon to find out that his father, who is the Duke, was actually, in order to pay the bills and keep the estate, was running an underground, literally under the ground of the property, a marijuana operation. And he's running this marijuana operation. So obviously throughout the vast majority of this show, and sorry, this lady, Susie Glass, is the woman who's running this marijuana operation. So throughout the show, all the episodes are really action packed. You know, how you would think like running a marijuana operation might run if you're making a TV show out of it. And you might think that that's the story, but the story that the vast majority of people are paying attention to is, when are Eddie and Susie going to get together? Everybody wants to know. These people, like, you can tell that there's some love tension here, and when are they going to get together? So there's a tighter story underneath that, and it's almost always going to revolve around people. People tell stories, and we connect with people. We do not connect with products. So I would really help you, or implore you, to focus your story on you as the person, the consumer, and how that person is going to interact with your product and be with your product, and the buyer, and what are they going to, how are they going to be able to interact with, and what are they going to gain from the product. The next thing we want to think about is clarity. So we have a tendency, and Julia's point earlier about being caught in an elevator now 3 times, needing to pitch curate. Clarity is pretty key when you're trying to pitch your business in an elevator. It's a pretty short ride, especially if none of us live around, you know, New York City. Well, I guess you guys are up in DC. There's some pretty tall buildings, but probably not going to be catching somebody going from the first floor to the 90th floor. So you got a very short period of time to tell your story in an elevator. And oftentimes we have a short period of time to tell anybody a story because our attention spans are very small. You know, the sales sheet we were talking about before, I thought it was a really key point from Esther, that there was a lot going on there. And while I do think it was a pretty spot on sales sheet, like I'd be pretty pleased if somebody showed me that a sales sheet like that. I did think that there was, like, we could have removed some things from that, right? We could have removed some things to create clarity. I think Lauren made a great point about, there was like a multiplication of something. There was the pictures of the product on the right, and there was also the pictures down the bottom, and it may be creating a little too much. There was also some writing that nobody's going to read, right? Get rid of that. It's not part of the clarity. So clarity is really the part of all great storytelling, is clarity. Let's get to the point. What's the point here of what we're talking about? And then if we can catch their attention, we can then ride that train. So let's get to the point up front.
Is it
So,
true?
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you go, Esther.
I've heard many times that you should be like a 5th grader should be able to understand like what you're selling, or like is that true? Is that necessarily true? Or like how, because I have a friend actually that has a business, and it's like very complicated when I hear him talk about it, and it just kind of loses me, and I kind of catch myself dozing off. I'm like, oh wait, he's explaining his business, and it's just unbelievably complicated, but which I don't think should like necessarily should be. So how I don't like to use the word dumb it down, but like how should you best like strive to explain it? Like should it be a 5th grader level, or I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, I guess, Jeff?
It's a really, really awesome point, Esther. Particularly, I think about this often when sort of pitching a business to get money, because in those cases, the people you're pitching to probably don't understand your product as much as you're pitching to your customer, right? But I would actually harken back to point number 1 as my main point, which is know your audience. So yeah, your friend should probably know that that he or she is talking to you, who has is not in this space or industry in any way, shape, or form. And thus, I would start from that 5-year-old point of view. There are
Right.
other scenarios, of course, where you might want to start, pretty down to and get granular. So I think it always comes back to knowing your audience.
Okay.
I will say that there was everybody. I think it's a really good point though, because everybody, including myself, makes this mistake all the time when trying to pitch their ideas to people, right? Like I'm passionate about certain things and I want to pitch an idea to somebody, and I oftentimes find myself starting way too granular than just the high level. If we start too granular, you're right, Esther. You're just like kind of you blank
You
out,
lose
and then you're doing
person.
like a nice.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
nodding along and you're smiling, and they're continuing to talk, and nobody's really.
Yeah. And Jeff, you made a good
Yeah.
point about assuming that, like, so my friend, he assumes I know all this background knowledge, all this that
Right.
builds to what he's selling, but I don't. So it's I don't know. I think there's a balance. And so it's like, yeah, a lot of jargon that's used that I'm not familiar with. So I think it's just like you said, it goes back to audience and just knowing who you're talking to. So that's really good.
It was an awesome question. I think starting from that, always starting from that. It's usually not the 5-year-old I go at, but I have a 5-year-old and she's pretty darn smart, and I'd say that's probably a pretty good place to start. But usually people say like 10 or 12-year-old, but I think 5-year-old is actually probably even better.
I think it was fifth grader. Fifth grader.
Yeah, maybe
How
fifth
old are
grader.
fifth
Fifth grader
graders?
is like 10. Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah, 10. Okay, I think that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, fifth grader.
You, Jeff.
So if you can start there, because then I love starting there, because then people will ask questions that they don't feel uncomfortable asking. If you start really granular and then you have like 27 questions, then as the listener, you're like, oh, I'm clearly out of my space here. I'm gonna forget about it. I'm just gonna zone out and smile. But if you start at that fifth grader level, you put that other person in a place of comfort before starting. There's another piece to this though that I think you could harken back to the sales sheet. I think about this when pitching your business for money, but the sales sheet's a great example. When there's too much on there, which Esther, you brought up that point before as well, so I can tell you really love clarity. When there's too much on a page, we can immediately zone out. It's the same thing like when you go into the grocery aisle and you see like 70 different cereals and you're like, I have no idea where to start. Like just the one that looks like Cheerios sounds good. So like we gotta narrow things down. Like it's the same thing in our life. When we do the person who tries to do 10 things at once, like we do this like multitasking thing, like we're so proud about multitasking. The person who does 10 things at once does 0 things. We all do nothing when we do 10 things at once. Like you gotta focus, you gotta get clear and just execute on what you're talking about. So be very clear is our third one. I'll give you one more point here with clarity that is maybe the one thing I would implore you to write this down. This is really important when pitching your business for money. It's equally and of greater importance, maybe even when you're pitching your business to your customer, is that once we know who we're talking to, and thinking about the steps moving forward too, but we need to connect. We want to connect the problem with the solution as clearly as we possibly can. So if someone uses a particular word to describe their problem, then you want to use that particular word when you're describing your solution, right? That makes a very clear connection in their brain. How do we get to clarity, you think? So if you're talking to somebody and you're like, man, I'm not sure, like you got to get a gist after the first couple of sentences that they might not get what you do. How might we get to clarity? Or before you even start talking, maybe, how might you understand what you should say?
Ask them questions about what their pain point is and try to get to know them a bit better.
Amazing, Shai. Nobody ever gets that question. It's perfect. Yes. Amazing. Yes, we need to ask questions, people. We have to ask questions. And questions are great because questions are great for two reasons. One, questions are great because believe it or not, in a sales scenario, the person asking the questions is the one who's in control of the conversation. So if you're asking questions, it might seem like you're taking a backseat to the conversation, but you're actually the one in control of the conversation. So asking questions is very important to lead where the conversation goes. Asking questions is also really important from creating a relationship with the person, that everybody likes to be the one who's talking and telling you about themselves and their life and who they are. So asking questions makes people feel comfortable. Nobody likes to be talked to or explained to, especially mansplained to. So asking questions is really helpful. It's really becomes the difference between you, kind of shooting arrows in the dark and you making an actual connection with the person that you want to sell to. And this like these question things, this can happen from a sales perspective, because when we think about sales and selling your product, the sales does not happen or does not stop when that product is sold, right? Sales continue after that process, and asking questions becomes equally as important after they've purchased that product. How did you like the product? How did it set up in your retail space? How fast did it move off the shelf? Did people have any feedback from the product? Like, is it like, do you need extra signage? Gosh, all kinds of stuff, right? There's so many questions we can ask. That can happen in form of survey. It can happen surveys that we can send online. It can happen in the form of physically going into the store and asking customers who are taking it off the shelf. But asking questions is so key before, during, and after the sales process. So asking questions is going to get you to clarity, and you will know that you have got to clarity if, can you guys see my screen? Can you guys actually see all of this? Let me move this down. I didn't know. Can you guys see me looking at you too? Or can you just see my screen? Oh,
Yep, we see both of you guys. Both
okay.
screen and you.
So I just, because it was blocking my screen, so I don't know if you were not seeing some of the words. I would encourage everybody, you're probably not going to write this down right now, but if you can, take a screenshot in some way of this slide, that'd be really helpful, so you can review this later, because you can go out and just practice kind of your pitch even to yourself, and then be able to write down and answer these questions. If there's one thing maybe to take away, it'd be, are you getting the clarity in what you're saying? So if you've achieved clarity, your customer will be able to answer these 5 questions, which are, what do you offer? What is that thing? And going back to that sales sheet we were looking at before, it was very clear with that picture that they put up the top what that item is. That is what they offer. What do you offer? How will it make my life better? How will it make my life better? You could, if we went back to that same sales sheet we were talking about before, you could definitely point to the pieces around top 9 allergen free. You could point to 120 days of shelf life, maybe from a buyer perspective, right? So how will it make my life better by purchasing this product? What do I need to do to buy it? What do I need to do to buy it? That's where Julia before was saying below that it'd be really awesome if you have not just contact information, but where might I buy this product? Can I buy it on Fair? Do you have a case minimum that I need to hit? Do you have just a minimum volume that I need to hit? Do I go to your website? What do I need to do to buy this product right now? And then the last 2, what will happen if I don't buy it? And what will happen if I do buy it? And these can kind of seem like they're not like threats, but they are questions that are very important that we're going to dig into in a second, which is they're really pertaining to the philosophical meaning about why someone is buying your product. Any questions? Everybody take a screenshot.
Would that be the portion of like the solution that you're selling? Like those last 2 is like what the problem that you're solving, I guess.
Yeah, very much. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll talk about that connection in just a second, but that's exactly it. All right, number 4. Number 4 is people have problems and you have solutions. Julia brought this up earlier. It's a very key point. people are buying your product not out of a whim, like they have a problem and you have a solution for it. I think our going back again to knowing your audience and going back again to getting clarity and telling the proper story within that, you don't have one solution and everybody's problem is different. So I'm going to run through a little scenario with you talking about Italian food. Let's say just that you make Italian food here. So there are a million problems with Italian food. And I'm going to give you a couple of problems and a couple of solutions. So here's a problem. There is no authentic Italian food nearby, you might say. You might have a solution. We make authentic Italian food. Somebody else walking down the street might have a different problem. Say, I'm so bored with all the authentic Italian food. Well, your solution might be, we make Italian food with a new age twist. Somebody else might have a problem. Italian food has become too expensive. Your solution is we make affordable Italian food. I'm sick of the old school Italian eatery, but we dish out Italian food in a renovated 1950s car mechanic shop with zero Frank Sinatra playing on the soundtrack. I love Italian food, but I feel like it makes me fat. Well, we serve light Italian fare alongside expertly crafted mocktails. So there are many ways to make Italian food fit a solution or fit a problem that a potential buyer is coming to you with. And I'm certain that you can think about that with your own business as well. Obviously, some of these things play off each other. Maybe you do make Italian food. Maybe you don't make authentic Italian food. Maybe you don't make authentic Italian food. But some of these things, like there's some flex within that, especially if you make a variety of different items. So you can see how these things like start to build on each other, right? Like knowing your audience allows you to get to clarity, and with that clarity, you can tell them the correct story. And that story is going to involve matching your solution with their problem. Digging deeper, Esther, into the last two questions on slide 14, which were what will happen if I don't buy it? And what will happen if I do buy it? Let's look a little bit more about the philosophical meanings of why people buy things. And this is applicable to literally everything under the sun. It could be applicable to buying a certain book. It certainly could be applicable to buying a certain cake or cupcake. So we can start here with, I'm thinking of buying a Tesla. The external reason for buying a Tesla obviously is that I need a car. You wouldn't be buying a Tesla if you didn't need a car. So I need a car. An internal reason that you might be buying a Tesla is that I think I want to be seen as an early adopter of new technology. But maybe a philosophical reason for buying a Tesla would be that I believe strongly that the decisions I make about what I drive affect more than just me. They might affect the planet, they affect the workforce, they affect my local economy, whatever that might be. So these may be the real reasons why someone is going to decide to buy a Tesla, right? Let's just think about the top one, the external one. If someone wants to buy a car, they don't need to buy a Tesla, right? So Tesla's marketing team does not put together ads that point to the fact that Tesla makes cars. We know that they make cars. They point to people being excited. They pointed early on about people being excited about being an early adopter of new technology, and their ads point a lot to like how that will make them feel in society as a human being that drives a Tesla. So the internal and philosophical pieces are really key to why people make decisions. In lieu of how much time we have left, I was going to involve you in this scenario, but I'll just skip to some answers of why we might buy an espresso, and then maybe see if anybody wants to bring up a certain product that they have, and see if we can put together some external, internal, and philosophical reasons. So I'm thinking about buying an espresso. Everybody know what an espresso machine is? An espresso machine is that cool machine that you can put in your house that you can make lattes and espresso and such in your own house. So external, like maybe you have like one of those I don't know, K-cup machines, right? And you make K-cup coffee in the morning and you say to yourself, it's January 1st, forget about that. New me, new year. I want better coffee at home. I'm going to buy an espresso machine. All right. Internal reason might be, I want my home coffee machine to make me feel sophisticated. Obviously, having an espresso machine in your house is going to make you feel a lot more sophisticated than putting a plastic cup into a K-cup machine. Philosophical reason, though, might be that I shouldn't have to be a barista to make a decent cup of coffee. This isn't that complicated. It's not rocket science. Let me just get an espresso machine and make this awesome latte. My wife would definitely agree with that. She makes a latte every morning on an espresso machine, and she says that they're just as good as she gets in the store. So point here is that there's emotional or philosophical reasons for buying something that are way more important than than what you're offering on the surface. You're not just selling cake. You're not just selling tacos. You are selling a reason that is very specific to the person that you're talking to, that is focused on the internal and philosophical reasons for why they're going to make a purchasing decision. I'll offer it up if anybody wants to like put their product on the table here, and maybe come up with some thoughts, or maybe we can come up with some thoughts as to what that is. I'm happy to continue on to our other points.
I feel like a quick note is that goes for retailers also. Like, like for example, like, the cheese example, the problem that you're probably solving isn't how awesome the cheese is, but the customers might be asking lots of questions. Like with the cheese example, like what kind of allergies does this, have in it? And the company is like addressing that question right off the bat. Like, hey, like this is like, allergy free for all these allergies. Or it might be like the size and packaging, specifications, and like you're solving that problem. I feel like this kind of goes for retailers too.
Absolutely, and that actually plays into our next point here. It's perfect transition. Thank you. So point number 5 is, what are their goals, right? What are their goals as the person that you're talking to? There is underlined there. What are their goals? Not your goals. What are their goals when you're talking to them? Your goal is obviously to sell more cake, but that is not their goal. Their goal might be to sell a lot of cake, but they have a lot of other goals besides selling a lot of cake. So I think, and oftentimes I think about when we think about their goals, we are thinking about the positive goals. So are they going to be able to sell a lot of cake? And we focus on here's, and we can look at the sales sheet as that example too, but where like, here's the, it's going to, like, it looks really good. It fits that top 9 allergen-free community that you keep getting asked to have more products in. The branding is beautiful. It has a barcode. It's easy to scan. It's like all these, or actually that's kind of the opposite, but like these beautiful things of like how you're going to sell more of this stuff. One of the things we don't really think about too much is the goal of not losing their job. And that sounds like a little bit intense. Obviously, like them bringing in like your seed cheese is probably not going to lose their job, but it could be like the straw that breaks the camel's back. And everybody in every job is always thinking about like, how can I do a great job at my job so that I don't lose my job, right? And so naturally in any purchasing decision, and this happens with all of us, so like 99% of the time when we are making purchasing decisions ourselves, we are choosing between multiple options, and we're basing it on what is the one that is least likely to let us down. And so battles are often more won by sort of decreasing the downside potential than promising the upside return. So we can talk about how delicious our cake is. We can talk about how beautiful the packaging is of the cake. We can show them all the consumer quotes that we've got that are like how pumped they are, and we have a 4.9 star rating, and that's all wonderful. But some of the important stuff on that sales sheet that we shouldn't look past are the things that are going to decrease the downside potential for the buyer. So does it have a barcode? Does it have all of the ingredient information on there and the allergen information on the product? Is it going to show up on time, right? How much of this product do I have to buy so that it's not taking up so much space in my fridge or in my storage space? Yeah, all these things that are going to decrease downside potential for someone. I would highly suggest that in your spare time, you make a list of all the things that your customers might be worried about before deciding to make a purchase decision. And I would separate that list out by the type of customer, right? So going back to number one, what your audience is, and I would list out the different audiences that you sell to. And then I would think about, and that could also include, again, if you're thinking about raising money for some reason, shape, or form, like what are the things that your customers might be worried about, and start putting those into your pitch as you see fit. Number 6, and our last thing to think about when we're thinking about selling our product or ourselves to anyone, is that people buy relationships, not products. Julia touched on this a little bit earlier, a couple of times, and it's, yeah, clarity is really key, but relationships are maybe more key, I think, than clarity, if I had to pick one. And I would say if, not to toot my own horn, but I've been pretty successful in pretty much every sales role that I've ever been in. And I think a lot of that, again, comes with the fact that, like, I think it was personality-wise something that I was sort of born to do. I was not born to create rocket ships. Not as like detail-oriented as someone would want to be an engineer. But I was born to sell, so I put it in that. But I think a lot of that is the fact that I focus much of my energy on creating positive relationships with the person that I'm selling to. I'll give you an example in the work that I do right now with Curate, which is my role is to create relationships with buyers, which are people who work for Sodexo, Aramark, and Compass Group within hospitals and universities. And then I am to then make relationships with vendors, people like yourself who create awesome artisan products locally. And then I am to make a connection for them to have ongoing purchasing decisions. One thing that I could very easily get mixed up in is that there are proactive vendors, as you should be, that reach out to us and say, like, hey, like, let me give you the sales sheet, like, let me give you some samples, like, this is awesome, like, can I come in and like talk to them, and do you think we could get these products in, because these products sell really well over here? And I could be I could very much take that information, which I know a lot of salespeople do in the food space, take that information, take those samples, and go right out to my buyers and go, yeah, I really think you should put these chips on the shelf, or this, this drink on the shelf. I think it'll sell great. But that's disregarding all of that information, first off, that I said prior in this phone call, right? It's just me wanting to do a favor for a vendor who's doing a good job, as you should, being proactive and putting your product out to the people selling your product. But what I do instead is I just focus on the buyer. That's all I do. I just focus on the buyer, the person who's buying the product. And I say, John, Tim, Susan, what's going wrong? What's working well? What do you need help with? And from there, I then go out and I find matching solutions. Now, it makes it way easier for me to find a matching solution when my vendors are being proactive and telling me the things that they're involved with. So it's not that I don't like that information, but I don't personally take that information out and then go sell it, because that's not creating a relationship. A relationship is me and the buyer saying, buyer, you can trust me. I'm here for you. I'm not trying to push anything on you. I just want to know what I can do to help you. And that's creating relationship. Another level of creating relationship as we wrap up here is, and most of us are half decent at this, but a lot of us aren't. And so I do want to touch on it. And this is one of the things, like any good sales class always tells you about creating a rapport. They use the term rapport. It's just like asking personal questions, really. Asking personal questions and getting to know the person. I would ask you for a second. I'll give you like 10 seconds to think about it. Like when you think about in your town or at your farmer's market, who is your favorite vendor, your favorite restaurant, your favorite coffee shop, your favorite producer of something at a farmer's market? Who's that favorite person for you to go buy from? I can tell you, for me, that person is Aaron of Cold Country Salmon. And we don't even buy that much salmon and fish, but like when we buy fish, we always buy it from him. And I love I think about him and say hi to him every time we walk around the farmer's market, even when I'm not going over to it, because he has created with me this awesome relationship. He has a line constantly out the back of his, his fish stand, which is also probably a smart move on his behalf because a lot of people aren't buying fish all the time. So they see this line, they think, oh man, fish must be really good. But he has a line, and he has the line not because it takes a long time for him to find some fish in the cooler and ring it up, but he's always asking questions about me and our family and what we're up to, and creating a relationship with us. And it makes me want to buy fish nowhere else except at Cold Country Salmon with Aaron. So please create some relationships. People buy relationships. They do not buy products. These are some of the factors that you bring to the interaction that play into this relationship piece. I'm not going to run through them because we're out of time here, but it's important, I think, to think about the fact that again, like, forget about your product. And I actually think, like, you can look back at the presentation that I just put together to tell you about, like, I didn't really talk about product at all. Like, I didn't really talk about product really at all. I don't know. I mean, I didn't talk about my product in any one of those scenarios we talked about. It's really just talking about, like, how are you getting to the problem that your buyer's having, and how are you creating a relationship to tell them the proper story. That's really all it is. And oftentimes I think we go into these sales relationships and we're just trying to sell our product, and it's just not about that at all. It's how we present ourselves too, and that's what this slide is about, which you guys will get this slide. I want to stop because I really want to open it up to questions that anybody has. So I'll end it here, and thank you all. The 6 things that you want to think about when selling yourself or your product is to first know your audience, shoot for clarity to be able to tell a proper story, help people have problems and you have solutions. Make sure you match them one-to-one. Again, a really key point here is, and maybe one cool, simple, easy to remember takeaway is that if you hear in someone's tone or specifically a word that they say, or an email that they write, a problem that they're having, match that same word in your solution, because that's going to be the easiest way for them to make an association with that. What are their goals, not your goals, and that people buy relationships, they do not buy products. Thank you for your time. Obviously, the number one thing to do is to actually practice. We all think we're so good at sales, but we think we're so good at sales because we know our product. We're not actually that good at sales. We actually have to practice what we're selling. So take some time and cut out an hour of your next week, put it on your calendar, and just run through those questions that we had, the 5 questions, like did my buyer get to clarity? Do a pitch, see if you can answer those 5 questions, and then try to put together a 90-second pitch for yourself that you can do to each one of your own audiences.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff, for that really great presentation, and, just so much to think about and so many great tips and tricks. I wanted to quickly mention that I dropped our survey link in the chat. One of the reasons we're able to offer these opportunities for free to you all is because we also ask for your feedback in a very brief survey. So please do follow the link and fill it out. Also, I wanted to say we are going to also be collecting, and I thanks to Lori Savage for uploading her is getting in touch with you all to have you upload your sales you would like to our sell sheet stash, and then we will have a collection of sales sheets that we're going to then promote to the local retailers and wholesalers. So stay tuned for that. We also, in the sell sheet stash, we have templates for sales sheets that you can take a look at and use if you would like. So we'll send those to you afterwards via email. So just thank you so much, you all. Does anybody have any last questions? I know we're over time, but if anyone has any last questions or comments, please chime in.
Yes, thank you. This is really good. I definitely learned a lot. I had a sell sheet in Word, and this will definitely help me upgrade that. Julia, I think in the beginning you had mentioned like having like a buyer's relationship for like ingredients. Maybe I didn't hear that right. But if I did hear right, I would love more information on that to try and lower food costs.
Yeah, you know what, Shai, I'm gonna throw I'm not totally with you further. So I'm going to throw my email into the chat, and feel free to just shoot me an email, and I'm happy to connect with you afterwards on this and chat through.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Julia. Thank you so much, Jeff. I just feel like I learned a lot, and I feel like that's just thanks so much for your all great presentation.
Yeah, of course.
So
And we've got one more workshop coming up, virtual
great
workshop
day.
coming up
Let us know if
on
you have
the
any
11th.
questions via email. Otherwise, enjoy the sunshine today. Thank you.
See you, everyone.
Hey, Larian, I just want,
Hey.
I totally forgot to end the recording. And then I tried to, and I made you co-host because my internet was in and out. I don't know if you saw me sliding out of the Zoom. My internet, for some reason, it's not raining, it's not windy.
Right.
Don't know why.
Yeah, I know mine was a little unstable too. So, but is it ended now? The recording?
No, it still says recording.
Okay.
But I'll
So
have to,
Julia has just re-entered the waiting room because I heard you all say that you're going to stay on for a moment afterwards.
yeah, do you mind staying on too? It's to chat through the expo plan.
Sure, that sounds great. Let me go.
I totally forgot, and I hopped off.
No worries, no worries.
We want to stop the recording.
Jessica.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to stop the recording and let's see. Jessica.
I made you co-host, Lorian. So let me
Okay,
know.
great. Great. I think it's just us now. I never have had to do that before, but I just sort of had Zooms remove Jessica because she obviously probably got doing something else. Yeah.
Are
I
you
feel
able
like
to
we can-
stop the recording, Lorian?
Yes, that's probably a good thing. Oh, I have to do it. Okay.
Yeah, because I
I
no
forgot.
longer can because I made you host when my internet was unstable. I was like, I do not want to end the call by accident.
Good. Stop recording. Stop recording. Great.
Thanks, Lorian. I'll have to go back and trim it. It's fine.